So we'll give another minute or two as people enter. I'll give one more minute. And I'll start. People keep entering. I'll start since it's 2:30 though. So hello and welcome to the presentation session 2B. I'm Jackson Hoke, your moderator, and Anna is going to be watching the chat. For our final sessions today, we have 5 presentations. The first 3 are going to be 5 minutes, and the final 2 are 15 minutes. I'll keep track of time so the presentations run smoothly. Please enter your questions into the Zoom Q&A feature. You're all invited to upvote the questions you'd like answered. If a question is for a specific presenter or presentation, please do specify. If we have time after a presentation, I may ask a question. If not, we'll keep moving and we'll have the Q&A at the end. All right, then, let's begin. So, Carrie Collin, you're up first.
Hello, just a moment. Right. Hi all, my name is Carrie Cullen. I am the research librarian for physical sciences at the University of California, Irvine. I'm a white woman with auburn hair and glasses wearing a sleeveless top with polka dots. This talk is on designing an evidence synthesis intake survey to conserve librarians' time and help researchers grow. Last year, our systematic review team grew from 3 health sciences librarians to 7 librarians across several disciplines, and we began seeing a substantial increase in the number of reviews outside of the health sciences, as well as more types of evidence synthesis projects. Around the same time, we also received notice that our university was discontinuing its Qualtrics subscription. Thus, this was an ideal time to reimagine our intake survey. Our new survey requires an answer for each question, as we used to receive responses with a lot of blank answers. So we now require a team to list a name for each of the primary review roles, including statistical and content experts and a project organizer. Because we're receiving more requests outside the health sciences, we removed a question requiring PICO concepts, instead asking for the research objective and core search concepts. Since many of us were emailing teams before meeting, asking for some seed articles to demonstrate the type of evidence they were looking for, we started asking for these articles right within the intake survey. We now also ask for the team to share a link to their protocol, even if it's still in draft form. A message on the survey's landing page directs individuals and students to not complete the survey and to instead schedule a regular reference consultation. And for those who are unsure about which methodology to select, we refer them to our LibGuide for common types of evidence synthesis, a decision tree from Cornell, and the Write Review website. We link to tasks and timelines of a typical systematic review to give teams a better idea of the extensive work and time involved. Finally, we link to several resources to help with the protocol writing process, including PRISMA guidelines and the JBI Manual for Evidence Synthesis. And now all the teams we hear from are perfectly prepared for the evidence synthesis process. Just kidding. Teams are still unprepared. While we've seen some improvement, we are still meeting with researchers who are under the impression that they can crank out a systematic review or other evidence synthesis project in a couple months, many of them on their own. And we find ourselves doing a lot of work to prep for these initial meetings, only for the teams to abandon the project altogether after we meet. So in a recent meeting, we decided to put together a checklist for teams to go through before completing the intake survey. The checklist currently lives on the Schedule a Consultation page of our Evidence Synthesis LibGuide, above the link to the intake survey. And I've shared the links to this in the resources. You can also get to that through the slides or through the Google Docs version using the link in this slide heading. In this checklist, we ask that the team have a purpose or rationale for the project beyond just getting a publication. They're also expected to have a specific research question, not just a general topic of interest. Otherwise, we'd like them to have a talk with us first so we can work on refining that question. We reinforce that these are team projects and why exactly this is important. We ask teams to acknowledge that they have searched the literature for evidence to support the review and for similar existing or in-progress reviews. We explain that evidence synthesis requires following certain methodologies and documenting the work, as well as aiming for a comprehensive search. Finally, we ask them to acknowledge that their entire team is aware of the time commitment and that in many cases, they may need to establish a protocol before beginning the review. So this is still a work in progress, and it remains to be seen if this will make much difference. But we hope that it will encourage more research teams to consult with us outside of our formal evidence synthesis service, that they'll reach out for help refining their research question or consider if another sort of literature review might be adequate for their needs. And most of all, that they will actually explore the resources that we share before we have a meeting. So we may incorporate this into our actual intake survey, requiring that teams check off each box and sign off on the checklist. We may also record a short video walking teams through the checklist. So during the Q&A, I'm happy to take any questions, but I also encourage you to reach out with any comments on how you handle this process at your institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. That was really good timing. Marissa Iverson's up next.
All right. Sure. There we go. All right. Hi, everyone. Let me just start my timer. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa Iverson. I'm the research support librarian at the UConn Health Sciences Library and UConn Health in Farmington, Connecticut. And today my lightning talk is on please remove me from the author list, how to use the ICMJE authorship recommendations to protect your work. So I will tell you my story and hopefully you can learn from it. So back in November 2021, I started working on a systematic review and meta-analysis with a team of residents and their department head as their librarian co-author. In January 2022, the library formally launched our systematic review service and memorandum of understanding, but we didn't force any in-progress projects to sign the MOU. So in February, I ran the searches, deduplicated, made the Prisma flow diagram, et cetera, et cetera. In June, the team asked me to update the searches and the figures. They were submitting their preliminary results to a conference. And then in September, they let me know that they were planning on submitting the manuscript to a well-known reputable journal. And then silence. I didn't hear anything for a while. This is pretty typical. I moved on. I didn't think much of it. But then in July 2023, so almost a year later, I get this email out of the blue that from an editor at one of the world journals. This is not where I thought we were submitting our paper, but apparently we did, and they're asking for edits. So I email my team saying, hey, how's it going? Can I see the manuscript? What happened with peer review? Can I help with anything? Do we need to update the search? And then silence. They don't get back to me. And then a month later, I get, congratulations, you're about to be published and you have 48 hours to submit any final edits. But those edits can't affect the authors, the manuscript text, or the figures or tables. The manuscript itself, it was missing some key points from Prisma for abstracts, Prisma search. None of the database platforms were mentioned. The search dates were wrong, and only the PubMed strategy was provided, even though I gave them all of them. But probably the worst thing was there were two Prisma flow diagrams showing different numbers. One of them was from when I originally ran the search in February, and the other one was from when I updated it in June. They took both of them and put them both in the manuscript. So I proceed to panic. to borrow what Amy said yesterday in her keynote, I did not want to end up in evidence synthesis jail. I've been doing systematic reviews for a while. I didn't want my name on this. I didn't want to get in trouble with my fellow librarians. And also, this was a team, including a department head. I was really worried about fighting back on this and affecting the library's relationship with this department. So I emailed my supervisor, the head of reference for support. I emailed my library director, and my director wisely recommended I look at the ICMJE author recommendations. So if you don't know, ICMJE stands for the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, and they have a list of recommendations that authorship is based on these 4 criteria. So you should have substantially contributed to, in this case, the methodology of the work, that you drafted or reviewed the manuscript, that you were able to give final approval on what's published, and that you can be held accountable. So by my recollection, I definitely contributed to number 1, but I was not given the opportunity to do number 2 or number 3. So I don't qualify as an author. So that's what I sent to the team and to the editor, basically stating I don't qualify. I can't be an author. I didn't do them. I didn't do numbers 2 and 3. So yeah, what happened next? I did send my edits and comments on the manuscript to the team. I felt bad for the residents, and just, helped where I could. The department had emailed me back and said, quote, "I was unaware of the extent of involvement you wanted or expected, and I apologize for my oversight." That's probably the best I could have expected. There was some back and forth with the editor. They really didn't want to make any changes. But last I've checked, it doesn't yet appear to have been published. And when I think of it, I keep checking. So what are my lessons learned? What can you learn from this? This so underlines the need for a memorandum of understanding, some sort of document that clearly, or if not something that official, somewhere that you clearly state what your expectations are, what you will do for them, what you expect from the research team, and everyone's agreed on it. The other thing I learned from this is that this journal in particular clearly says on their website that they follow the ICMJE authorship recommendations. So hold them to what they say they do, or I like to say, call their bluff. The editor really, really fought back on making any authorship changes, but hey, it's on your website. That's what you say you're going to do, so let's do it. And I'm happy to take questions when we get to the Q&A, or feel free to reach out, and my slides are posted in Zoom. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Marissa, and great reactions, everyone. Yep, keep putting questions in the Q&A for the end. Jennifer DeBerg is up next.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Jen DeBerg, and I'm from the University of Iowa Libraries at the Hardin Library for the Health Sciences, where I've been for about 15 years now. And we have an evidence synthesis program, but this is really all about trying to get our campus team together to build a community, because we're getting more requests from other disciplines outside of the health sciences. So I've been working on this for about a year, and it's definitely work in progress. I've been working with the Systematic Review Service here at my library since 2011 when it launched. And I would say that it matured around 2017. And that really, to me, means that we became more fully staffed, or as fully staffed as we can be, and that we really had taken a lot of time to work on the content for our workshops. We had revised our intake form and our systematic review guide, and tried to standardize our processes as much as we could. So the graph on this slide just shows you kind of the breakdown of the different types of reviews that we're supporting, and not surprisingly, most of them are systematic, although we're getting a lot more requests from our users for scoping reviews and meta-analyses, which has been kind of ongoing, and that's kind of normal. But we're getting a number of requests from people that are just from users that just don't know what kind of review they want to do as well, which is kind of nice, because they admit that they need education, which I think I appreciate. So these are the actual numbers. And so it's around 200 total since 2017. So it's a busy review service. It's steady. We have 6 health sciences librarians who are supporting our service, and we do divide it by liaison area. I'm the keeper of the form, and then they get distributed out to the appropriate liaison. And the liaison that needs most help is the one who serves internal medicine. This is a slide of the subjects that represents the user groups that most use our service. Internal medicine is the highest, anesthesia and surgery is next, and then other health sciences is kind of a hodgepodge of departments like family medicine, emergency medicine, and then I also put in all the therapies in there as well. So what is kind of noticeable about this slide is that psychology and education, which is not a health sciences department, is represented here. And in fact, it's probably not quite accurate. I reached out to the psychology librarian and he said that he actually has done more towards 20 rather than 10. And then the other non-health sciences category on the right-hand side, I think is a little bit underrepresented as well, because our intake form is on the health sciences website. So not everybody is finding that link to get to the intake, but we're seeing more from social work. We're seeing more from music education, from sociology. We're getting kind of a variety, and then engineering, definitely getting more from engineering. I don't know the numbers exactly, but we had our engineering librarian who attended the Minnesota training years ago, and she actually shadowed me on a review many years ago, and I know that she's prepared to support them. So this is our campus, the lovely Iowa River kind of in the middle there, splitting up the campus between the health sciences and the non-health sciences, and just really to show you that we have kind of a large campus. We're a high research activity university, and the red circle is around the health sciences library where our review services has started, but it's kind of extending out. And so we have 7 campus libraries, and we're all over the place, which is great for our users, but not always good for us because we may not be communicating regularly. So that is really the whole point here, is that we are doing our work and not necessarily having a mechanism for communication other than our staff meetings and when we see each other, but maybe not are expecting to have a conversation. So I generally have most of my conversations with my colleagues on the bus, because I'm a bus rider. But around 2018 or so, we really started to notice more people attending our classes and more intake forms being completed from those outside of the health sciences. So I organized a sharing session. I reached out to see who was interested, and we got 10 instruction librarians and liaisons interested in learning more. And we wanted to make sure that they were aware, these are non-health sciences, 10 non-health sciences librarians, aware that they could take advantage of our materials that we had, that they could shadow us, that they could attend our classes. And we got good feedback from that. So we've been holding recurring meetings every 3 months now for the past year. And we're talking about things that are really common to all librarians who support any kind of evidence synthesis. So you'll see some listed there, which I probably don't have to read to you. So we've been doing this for about a year, and we are learning that it is great that we have a time and a space for building and providing service to our team and trying to grow that team and providing an avenue for ongoing support. The biggest challenge, I think, is providing a useful variety of topics and having some sort of theme without overloading the agenda. We also have a relatively small group, so if 3 or 4 people are absent, it could detract from the meeting. So my final slide here is the lovely fireworks display in Iowa City in the main campus, which I just figured the timing is great. But my hope is that I would like to make it more fun, more enjoyable. Right now we're doing Zoom meetings, and I would hope to not necessarily take the librarians to fireworks, but maybe go out to lunch or do a retreat. Also thinking about using Teams for this as well. And I would love to hear if people have been doing this. I would love to hear your ideas, because that's where we're at. We need more ideas to keep this going. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, so up next we have Ellie, John, Janet, and Morgan. Yep, and this will be a 15-minute presentation.
Yes, hi. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Elle Covington, And you can see I've got a couple of co-presenters, co-authors who are here as well. They're going to be helping me out on chat and the Q&A, so feel free to pop things in those places and activating our links. Thank you very much. This afternoon, I am going to talk a little bit about a project that we've been working on and some of our preliminary data for systematically mapping the research output of our institution to help us sort of develop our service as we go. So a little bit more information, if I can get my slide, there we go, about us. So when we started this project about a year and a half ago, I was at the University of Texas Arlington with the rest of the team. I am no longer there, so now I'm at the University of Nebraska Lincoln. Everybody else is still at UTA, and we are still working on this project. John did also change jobs, so we had a lot of sort of like this project's on a little bit slower than we would like to, but we are very excited to have preliminary data to share today. That we will be sort of talking about. You can also access our slides and some of our supplementary information at the link here. We have included our data extraction form there, as well as a bibliography of our included papers so that you can have access to those. So shout out to John, Janet, and Morgan. They are here as well. All right, so here is a little bit about what we did. First of all, just information, if you're not familiar with the University of Texas Arlington, we are a Carnegie R1 in the Dallas area. So there's a lot of research output here, and we decided to do a scoping review, a mapping review. We wanted to add the visuals in there on the evidence synthesis output of our institution, because we were trying to gain support at our libraries for starting a service. So we still don't have a formalized service at UTA, but we wanted to conduct this so that we could have really a data-informed decision-making for developing that service, and we would have something to present with the decision makers at our institution, as well as this was just a really great opportunity for us to go through the experience of conducting a review like this. When we started, only half of our team really had experience with systematic and scoping reviews, and so we thought this would be just a great time, a great experience to get the whole team involved, to learn how to do one of these reviews start to finish, and also see what's being done at our institution. So here's what we learned. We learned that evidence synthesis has been going on at UTA since 1982, 41 years. So we're a little bit behind in the library supporting this. And interestingly, the meta-analyses started, our first one in 1982 was in the field of education. And then we had meta-analyses in a lot of different areas. Our first systematic review was in 2005 in biology, and then things really started to take off in 2012. 2012 was the year that the first scoping review was published from UTA, the first qualitative interpretive metasynthesis. And so as you'll notice, we focused for this preliminary data. For the full mapping review, we've got a lot of different review types that we're looking at. For this preliminary data, we wanted to just show a little bit specifically the systematic reviews, meta-analyses, umbrella reviews, scoping reviews. And then this qualitative interpretive metasynthesis was really important for our institution because it is a methodology that came out of UTA and is specifically for the field of social work. And so we wanted to make sure that we captured that in our data. So moving on here, one of the main things that we really wanted to look at was who's doing these reviews. And so we sort of knew anecdotally that a lot of things were coming out of social work. I think it surprised us all how much social work is just basically dwarfing everybody else on our campus. all colleges on our campus are represented doing evidence synthesis. So everybody's doing them. You can see the breakdown here. A lot in psychology specifically, a lot in business, nursing and health innovation, as you would imagine, but just completely overwhelmed by social work. So this sort of validated me as the social work liaison at the time, feeling like this was a major need for this department or this college, and it absolutely was. And so breaking that down a little bit, I wanted to take out, so this qualitative interpretive metasynthesis, we know that was developed at our institution. We know that it was specifically developed for social work. And so I was thinking, you know, is qualitative interpretive metasynthesis skewing some of our data to show an overrepresentation of social work within these. But what I found is even if we took out that qualitative interpretive metasynthesis piece, social work is still doing almost 2 times the amount of evidence synthesis, so these other types of reviews, as anybody else on campus. So they are doing 39% of the systematic reviews, 71% of the scoping reviews, as you can see here. And then, you know, next highest is psychology, and then we've got business, and then we've got the college, ConHi. So the College of Nursing and Health Innovation is what that acronym stands for, all represented there. And the thing is, social work is not even like our biggest college on campus. That would be engineering. So I think just the extent of these that they're doing was pretty surprising to us. So going on, another thing that we were really interested in, obviously, is how many of these reviews include any librarian involvement at all. And so as we looked at these, we were looking not only at whether our librarians were involved, but any librarian involvement, because our researchers do a lot of collaboration with institutions, with outside institutions. And so what we found was not super surprising, but that there was not a whole lot of librarian involvement reflected in these papers. And so, you know, admittedly, this is only when they have reported it. So there's the possibility that we have or other librarians have helped out on some level with these reviews, but it was not reflected within the manuscript itself. But we developed a 0 to 3 scale where there was no librarian involvement at all, was a 0. 1 was there was a librarian consulted, so that was mentioned within the methods section of the paper. If a librarian was involved, that was a 2. And then if a librarian was a co-author, that was a 3. And so we averaged all of these. Average is pretty low there. It's, you know, 0.28 out of that 1 or that 0 to 3 scale. You can see that systematic reviews had a higher percentage of having some librarian involvement, specifically that librarian co-author at 9% down there. And then social work and our nursing and health innovation both had a little bit more librarian involvement than some of our other colleges and departments. We were also taking a look at, were they doing protocols? And this was, I mean, I would say this is about what we expected, but still a little bit disappointing. We did a 0 to 2 scale on this one. There was no protocol reported at all, no protocol mentioned. 1 was they mentioned the protocol, but we couldn't access it. There was no access to it. And then 2 being, we could find that protocol and it was accessible. And we even included some in there that, like, they said contact the author for the protocol, and I included that as accessible too. And even still, we just did not have very many of them that even mentioned a protocol. Part of that is the QIMS does not require a protocol, so that qualitative interpretive metasynthesis is not part of that. So that could be sort of impacting that data a little bit. But even so, I think it was disappointing how low that number was for us. And then we wanted to take a look. Personally, I was very interested in the guidelines that were being reported. Were they reporting guidelines at all? And what guidelines were they reporting? And this is, I think, one of the most interesting things that, to me anyway, that we found is different disciplines are using different sources for how they're talking about their methodology, what guidelines that they're using. And I really wanted to capture that. And so what we've got here are just some of the ones that were most used. So that, of course, Prisma is for scoping reviews, Prisma for protocols, all of those highly represented there. Very little using the Cochrane Handbook. We had some for the meta-analyses, so Glass being the seminal work for meta-analysis, and then Hunter and Schmidt's methods. So that their books, there was a number of different editions that I sort of like put all together in there. But the meta-analyses were the least likely to report guidelines, which I think was, again, disappointing, but not terribly surprising. And then Arksy and O'Malley is the seminal work for scoping reviews. There were a lot of those as well. And then that Aguirre and Bolton, that big white chunk down there towards the bottom, that is that seminal paper for the QIMS, for the qualitative interpretive metasynthesis. And so those they did very well at citing those. And I think there's a lot of reasons involved, being that those researchers are still at our institution. So very interesting with that. Another thing we wanted to see was what databases are being used. And so again, with social work being so much of doing so much of our evidence synthesis, it was not super surprising that PsycInfo, PsycArticles, social work abstracts were really high on the usage. These are only the databases that appeared in 15 or more reviews. So this is not all of the databases that were used. It was just not going to be possible to have any kind of chart that represented all of that. But this just gave us a good idea of what's being used most. And yes, we do have Google Scholar on the chart here. As you will see, 30 reviews listed Google Scholar specifically as a database. Yes. But we wanted to go ahead and put that here. This doesn't reflect, there were a number of reviews that actually used it as, supplementary searching. And so that's not reflected here. These are specifically the ones that reported it as a database. We were also interested in, what databases are they using that we don't have access to at UTA that maybe they're using with their collaborators at other institutions. And so 13 of those did use Embase and 11 Scopus. So that was another interesting point for us to sort of take back and file as we're working on developing our service and thinking through how to ask for support for that. So sort of to sum up, here's, I sort of hit on a few of these going through, but some of the things that surprised us was just the variety of differences in understanding between disciplines on what these terms mean, what evidence synthesis is, how they're thinking about meta-analyses, how they're thinking about, systematic reviews, how they're thinking about scoping reviews, who they're citing, right? All of those things, just the range of understandings on those was pretty surprising to us. It was also a little bit surprising that every single college on our campus was represented in this data. So they're all doing evidence synthesis. We wouldn't necessarily know that based on, the requests that we're getting from the libraries for support, but they are doing that. Social work, again, shocker, just how much they're putting out. Another thing that was surprising, especially for me personally, I was doing so much work with scoping reviews that I really expected scoping reviews to be a higher percentage of what we saw than the actual output indicates. What didn't surprise us, the growth, I think that surprises nobody here, just the rapid growth in the evidence synthesis that's being conducted, the inconsistency in the use of guidelines and best practices, the fact that the librarians have not been involved on our campus in these projects, and then the QIMS that we were seeing out there. And so I wanted to sort of wrap up with what are some takeaways for you, because this is all data that's very specific to our institution. And, I can hear you saying that's great and all. What can we get out of this? So I wanted to make sure that there were some takeaways that everybody could take from this. And for me, I think one of the biggest ones was this was such a great tool for our own learning as librarians. We got to go through all of the headaches of doing the data extraction, as we heard about earlier today, the data analysis. We feel so much more equipped to help our researchers now that we've gone through this process. So not only do we have the good data that we were looking for on the research that's being conducted at our institution, we feel better equipped to support that, having gone through so much of this process. Another important takeaway, I would say, question your assumptions. Don't rely on that anecdotal evidence for your specific institution if that's important for you. And sort of like going in with that, the requests are only the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more research going on than we know about based on the requests that we're getting from the library. Realize that your institution is different, and that's great. And so then what do you want to do with that knowledge? So do you want to do something like this? Do you want to do an environmental scan and get an idea and really tailor your service to that? Just sort of conversations, decisions to make within yourselves. So mapping your environment lets you build from your strengths instead of just responding to weaknesses. And I think that's a common theme for librarians is I think often with our evidence synthesis services, we feel like we're playing whack-a-mole. We're just trying to catch up all of these things. And so this is really a way that helps you get ahead of things and see what's going on and build on the strengths and support the research that is actually happening on campus. I would say also data talks. And that was one of the reasons that we did this was we wanted to have these data points that we could take back to the decision makers. And so we really feel that this gives us credibility. So once you are able to gather that data from your institution, you can take that back to those decision makers and say, this is why we need the support. The biggest one that I feel like we've talked about so much within our own teams is this language around evidence synthesis. What does it mean? What does it mean to us? What does it mean to librarians? What does it mean to our researchers? And just how much that differs based on the disciplines. And so that's been a major talking point for us and something that I think we'll continue to talk about. And then just sort of ending with like, what are your priorities and why? Are those based on what's happening at your institution? Is it based on what other libraries are doing? I think, you know, both are valid. We decided to go with, we really wanted to focus in on what's happening at our institution with our researchers. So hopefully in a whirlwind way, this gives you an idea of some of the things that we're working on and the ways that we're thinking about it. And just want to say thank you very much and look forward to answering some of those questions in the Q&A and chat.
Thank you. So yes, keep adding questions to Q&A. Our next presenters are Thea, Alyssa, and Amy.
All right. Hi, everyone. Let's get us started here. So my name is Thea Atwood. I am one of the librarians at Indiana University Bloomington. And I'm here today with my colleagues, Amy Minix and Alyssa Denneler. So Amy and Alyssa, if you want to introduce yourselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Minix, and I'm a neurohealth sciences librarian.
Hey all, my name is Alyssa. I am a reference librarian with a functional specialty in citation management.
Thank you. So in our time together today, at the very end of day 2 of LESS, we're going to talk with you about some of our steps for creating a learner-centered LibGuide for evidence synthesis and systematic reviews. So very briefly, we'll talk today about, come on, friend, why we decided to overhaul our LibGuide, our approach, what we've accomplished, and then we're going to wrap up with a few resources for everyone. So why did we overhaul our LibGuide? So I think one of the things to also mention to sort of understand what we're doing at IU Bloomington, we're a pretty newly established service. Our original LibGuide, I think, went live around the end of 2022. So for our campus, we're finding that many of our faculty, many of our students are coming to us with the same sort of entry-level questions that really don't go anywhere. How do I do a systematic review? And that's the end of the story. When we were also thinking about our service, our collaboration, we looked at our LibGuide, and I am definitely guilty of this, but our LibGuide was really an info dump. There's just a lot of information on there. And we know that from research, there is research out there that shows that students do much better when LibGuides are designed following pedagogy. So we're thinking about, okay, how can we serve our community better? So that gave us this goal of helping faculty and students understand the basics of evidence synthesis, with hopefully having more fruitful initial and ongoing conversations, as well as fewer emails. I'll hand this over to Alyssa.
Yeah, so as kind of we were already percolating on a redesign, our lovely associate dean also invited us to come speak with our colleagues in our division, just kind of about our service, kind of keeping them up to date on our model and what we're doing. And we did realize from some great questions they had in that session that even our own librarian colleagues were a little bit confused about our goals and our purpose and what we were doing. We had a colleague that I think we worked out at the end of the session that she had the idea that maybe we were teaching librarians how to do systematic reviews. If they wish to add that to their research practice, which, I mean, if that was something they wanted, but really what we were trying to explain is that we're supporting researchers, mainly outside of the libraries. We also have another team member who is not with us today because he is quite new to us, but his perspective is also a nice opportunity to kind of help us think about this learner-centered mentality in terms of someone who is also learning the practices of various types of evidence synthesis. So kind of a lot of things are aligning in a good time here for us to work on this redesign. What I'm leading into here is that I will give the credit here mainly to Taya, ended up kind of collating a set of instructional design philosophies that we really wanted to focus on for this redesign. And out of curiosity, also because we had to cut this presentation down a little bit, I did, click please, I did poll our colleagues as to their familiarity with the 3 philosophies that we decided to most focus on, those being writing for the web, learner-centered design, and the ADDIE model. As you can see here, overwhelmingly, the ADDIE model was the one that was of the least familiarity to our other colleagues here at IU Bloomington. Tay is going to talk more about what these models are and what we're doing with them, and Amy as well. But I just thought it was interesting. I kind of expected there to be a more balanced familiarity, but it was very clear that the one that maybe we should focus on would be the ADDIE model.
Yeah, next slide. So as Alyssa mentioned, one of the frameworks that helped us kind of frame learner-centered design was the ADDIE model. And for those of you who may not know what it stands for, it's analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. And it was developed by the US Army by the Center for Educational Technology at Florida State University. As Taya mentioned, we've provided some additional readings about the ADDIE model if you'd like to dig in a little bit more. But we thought it might be helpful to kind of use this project to talk through how we formatted the ADDIE model to our work. So initially, we conducted an analysis phase where we identified learning objects for the guide, and then we've moved into the design phase where we're at now. We've outlined the structure and the content of the guide. We're ensuring that it aligns with user preferences and learning styles that we identified earlier. And in the development phase, we're working on creating the actual content, selecting appropriate media such as text, images, or videos, and then making sure that that information is organized in a user-friendly manner. Once that's completed, we'll be ready for implementation. Implementation will include launching and promoting the guide through various channels and providing training or support to faculty or students who are conducting these evidence synthesis. And then we plan to evaluate the guide by collecting feedback from users, analyzing the usage metrics, and making improvements based on the data to ensure that the guide continues to meet evolving needs of our users effectively. Another consideration is writing for the web also comes with its own challenges. As you'll see here in a second, we had a wall of text on our previous version of the guide. And again, we have additional resources to help you think about presenting information as succinctly as possible to your users. And a shout out to Library Juice Academy. They have a Writing for the Web course taking place next March that may be of interest. And then finally, it's also worth mentioning that like many of you, we are doing this work while juggling other responsibilities. And we would like this guide to go live in August. So we need to ensure that we're building time to keep kind of plugging away at this. Next slide, please. So here's just kind of a quick snapshot of what we've done so far. This screenshot shows our previous navigation on the left and then our new navigation on the right. The shot on the left, I think shows how we use language that assumes that the users know what evidence synthesis is and that they understand any related jargon. So for example, you see on the left, we're pointing to a section focused on gray literature and how that fits into the review process. And on the right, we've streamlined that a bit to address questions that we expect users might have. And the goal is to help users identify the section that would best address where they are presently with their own reviews. Next slide, please. I also wanted to mention Wayne Reeves, who wrote Learner-Centered Design, A Cognitive View of Managing Complexity in Product, Information, and Environmental Design. He provides many different tools to support this work. One resource includes considerations for organizing content when creating a website, and those are to enable efficient navigation, develop system proficiency, make a meaningful organization scheme, and find balance between too many and too few categories in presenting content and system controls. So with that kind of framework in mind, we've adapted our new guide away from having just mass amounts of information and stepping back to create opportunities for learners to understand key terms and topics, and then breaking ideas into digestible chunks, as well as sharing the goals of the guide as well. Next slide, please. And then finally, we have another example here of how we're continuing to shift our content to best and better address the learner and the process rather than listing out tools or resources that seem out of context if you're not familiar with kind of the larger scheme. All right, I'll hand things back over to Taya.
Thank you. So I think we want to wrap up a little bit with some next steps and future goals, which may be based on some of what we've learned at LESS. We might modify. But of course, our first next step would be to publish our LibGuide. We would love for it to go live a week before classes begin at IU Bloomington, so in August. Developing a workshop, so using the LibGuide as a learning object itself, so the workshop reflects the LibGuide, giving folks reiterative ways to engage with the content, potentially developing spin-offs, so either focusing on where we have expertise, a whole other LibGuide, just drilling down into that, as well as some internal training. So again, our colleagues at IU Bloomington are a little confused potentially about what goes into evidence synthesis, but they would like to be able to, when they're sitting at the reference desk, say, oh, I know what you're talking about. I know who to point you to, right? They want just enough information to get them started so they feel a little bit more comfortable with all the wonderful things happening on our campus. And then of course, evaluating our data, really considering the guide as something that is sort of like a living document, perpetual beta, something that we can go back to and really make sure is meeting the needs of our faculty and our students at IU Bloomington. And so like we said, we have some resources for you. So if you're interested in learner-centered design, the Bergstrom Lynch paper is really incredible. We pulled a lot of content from that. There's the Derek Bok Center at Harvard for more general guidance. Writing for the web, it it can really challenge your brain to try and cut down and figure out how to write for the web. So if you have it in your funding and you can take the Library Juice Academia course, I found it really beneficial. I took it in 2018 and I'm still applying principles to my work today. And of course, there are, I think other places you can go to get that information. The Nielsen Norman Group, for example, is a really great resource. The ADDIE model, we've got a couple of pieces of information there. I believe the Bergstrom Lynch article also talks about the ADDIE model. And then I just want to end with, we've got some documentation to share with you. So our guiding principles, I won't click through all of these, but our guiding principles document was really reminders for us when we're entering into editing that LibGuide for how to be learner-centered and thinking about writing for the web. This is just a one-page document to help us, you know, again, ground us and center us in that. The ADDIE principle applied. So this is actually how we applied the ADDIE principle to our redesign of our LibGuide. I will show you the content and learning objectives. So one thing that's important to know is we wanted to really reduce the cognitive load of the folks visiting our LibGuide. And one way to do that is to have learning objectives and have a maximum of, you know, like 6 pages was, I think, some of the guidance we saw to reduce that cognitive load. So we came up with 6. We use these to really lay the groundwork of our guide. There's a little bit more information here, as well as content synopsis. So this is all our stuff. At the very bottom, oh, and we've got ideas for an internal guide. At the very bottom, it is CC BY. Please use it. We've also made a blank one for you to use. Ta-da! So please fill it out. Please reuse it. They're linked impermanently right now, but when it's shared with the OSF, we'll make sure it's broadly available. And I think, yay, I think that's all. Thank you all so much. We've got our emails there. If you have questions, please reach out. Again, our version 2 is going to go live in August. You can see our info dump as it lives right now. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, and we've got references, so yes.
Thank you for that presentation, and we're looking forward to seeing the guide. So we do have time for questions. So. In the Q&A, we had an anonymous attendee ask, ICMJE author rules. Is anyone using credit taxonomy? Literature searching doesn't seem to fit easily into the system. I might come back to that one. Let's start with a different one. A question from Marissa and Carrie. In both of your presentations, it seems like the constituents seeking evidence synthesis support do not fully understand why certain aspects of the process are important or necessary. First, would you agree with this characterization? And second, what might you recommend to improve how constituents read and appraise evidence synthesis as a form of scholarship before they seek work on one?
I'm happy to jump in on that. This is Carrie Cullen. First, 100% agree, Stephen. That is absolutely a problem. And what I try to do is encourage faculty to have students read and appraise evidence syntheses as an assignment, particularly instead of asking students to do a systematic review within a course, which unfortunately just continues to happen despite our better efforts. The AmStar and CASP critical appraisal skills program checklists are a really great place to start. And I think this is super important because there are just a ton of poor quality evidence syntheses that get published. And just because something says it's a systematic review and meta-analysis does not mean that it's trustworthy. So the other thing that I try to do is in reference consultations, I model some of this behavior, pointing out aspects of a systematic review or other evidence synthesis review that are or are not well done. And thanks for this question. I'm thinking now that I'd also like to run a workshop covering this topic for both faculty and students.
Yeah, I can chime in too. I'm also now thinking of workshops I'd like to do. Yeah, I know in our curriculum, our medical students get a lot of different chances to do various journal clubs and journal article presentations. And when I'm involved, if it's a systematic review, that's my chance to, dig in and point out things they did wrong, when usually there is something that they did wrong. But yeah, I would definitely agree with the characterization you started with. I also try to, in that first consultation with a research team, to really explain it, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, for the sake of reproducibility, transparency, all those good things, and try to get a good sense of how familiar they are with the process. And if they seem questioning of what I'm talking about, then I recommend some reading materials. But I could definitely do a better job of it. And yeah, I'm getting workshop ideas now.
Thank you both for your responses to that question. We have another question that came in for the last group that presented. Did you poll users, students, non-library faculty, staff, etc., about the new version of the library guide?
I can answer that quickly. We haven't gone live yet, and we're still in progress for completing it. But I think it could be very informative. We also do have LIS students, so we're also a library school, so it could be informative to bring them into the loop as well. Amy and Alyssa, I don't know if you have any other insights to this.
Yeah, I was thinking earlier during our presentation, one of the things we talked about was also how this could be useful when we're going around doing the kind of trainings for the various service points with our graduate students that staff them. I don't think we actually worked that into our final presentation, but they have been really great about being interested in triaging initial queries related to evidence synthesis topics, and very interested and invested in learning more about it. So that's going to be helpful as well, I think.
Thank you for your input there. And I did see that there were some responses to that first taxonomy question. So that has covered all the open questions that were left in the Q&A. I'll just say in general too, thank you again to all of the presenters. I did see a lot of feedback about people being impressed and enjoying the slides. So if any of you want to share too how you created your slides in the lobby, or yeah, with others, that may be of interest to others as well. I want to thank everyone for coming today to join day 2 of LESS. A reminder, tomorrow we do have the 3rd day of LESS, so please do join us. Thank you again to all presenters, and I'm going to pass it off to Cosette and Janessa for any final remarks.
Well, thank you all so much. And thank you, Jackson, for moderating. And thank you to all of our presenters from day 2 and all of our attendees. Another fantastic day of learning and connecting.
And my to-do list keeps getting longer with workshop ideas, LibGuide ideas, new things I want to learn. This has been a really fantastic day. And I can't believe the many different approaches to how we are all approaching our evidence synthesis services, making things new, adapting things. And so thank you for all of the great questions, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Exactly. And I'll say, the lobby will stay open. So if you'd like to continue the chat as that's going on in the lobby, please feel free to. It will not close, but we will see you tomorrow. All right.
All right. Bye, everyone.